The expanded university, imaginative and boundless. References are brought to you by our personal collection of books, the Cardass Library. By late 1994, after all three novels in the Thrawn trilogy had been completely released in paperback edition and the story was well known among the fandom and even with a good portion of the general audience, Lucasfilm's licensing department had to decide where to go next. Of course, additional novels were being released in the same continuity, but none had the epic, big event feel that Zahn's trilogy had. In the summer of '94, a brainstorming session took place that involved staff from Lucasfilm, LucasArts, and Bantam Books. That session involved what would become Shadows of the Empire. Later that year, in November, George Lucas would begin writing Episode 1 and the Star Wars Summit would take place at Skywalker Ranch. Licensees were clued in as to where Lucasfilm would be taking Star Wars in the future. It seems clear they had a vision in mind and wanted to keep things as consistent as possible, building around Shadows and, more importantly, Episode 1. Before this direction was decided on, something strikingly bizarre was proposed earlier in the year. In its raw form, it would have taken the expanded universe, and by extension, the Star Wars universe, in a completely different direction. Even with necessary adjustments, the project would have been a departure from everything that had been published to date, and from what could be reasonably expected. The name of this project? Alien Exodus. We can make an educated guess that in the spring of 1994, Ace Books asked author Robert J. Sawyer to write a trilogy of Star Wars books. This guess is based on Sawyer's claim that Ace reached out after they had just finished publishing a trilogy of novels he wrote for them, and the last book in the series is dated March 1994. The idea was to publish books based on entries from the book Monsters and Aliens from George Lucas. According to Sawyer's website, he wrote a 10,000-word outline just for the first book and a total of 11,000 words in sample chapters in January of 1995. Both are available on his website. In addition to the aforementioned book, Sawyer's website claims he also used a guide to the Star Wars universe and Galaxy Guide 4, Alien Races. Throughout the next several minutes, I will use unrelated photos from Star Wars publications as visual representations of the characters being discussed. Alien Exodus was never approved, and thus there are not any depictions of the events in the proposed story other than the descriptions in Sawyer's outline and sample chapters. The main story focuses on a character named Cosmo Hender, a human slave on a planet ruled by large insectoid aliens called Varlians. He and his fellow humans are accompanied by slaves from the following alien species: Bith, Celestin, Ithorian, Mon Calamari, Kubaz, Ortolan, Kitonak, and Twi'lek. Cosmo, as de facto leader of the humans, secretly meets with the leaders of the other species to plot escape and freedom. Rhodians and Gamorreans serve as guards for the Varlians. The slaves are made to construct a giant structure by hand. Cosmo is selected to be a personal attendant of the daughter of the Varlian ruler of the planet. She winds up teaching him how to read, which eventually aids in the eventual escape of the slaves. Also on the slave side are the Force, fomented treachery among the Rhodians, a plague, and the abilities specific to each alien species. The excellent night vision of the Kubaz, the subsonic sound generation of the Ortolans, and the head-tail communication of the Twi'leks. While reading to the ruler's daughter, Cosmo learns that the Varlians believe they were cursed for failing to enslave the Wookiees. He realizes the Varlians believe in a manifest destiny, and reasoning with them may be out of the question. Cosmo smuggles out a book called The Human Exodus and is newly inspired to be free after reading that humans once escaped slavery. We will discuss that later. The slave's toil turns out to be busy work, meant to keep the slaves in place as the Varlians used their presence to harness the Force by way of a blue crystal to move the planet from the cluster it resides in to a point closer to the center of Varlian space, where they will usurp the throne using the slaves as soldiers. In an act of desperation, Cosmo was able to levitate himself as a means of escape during a tense situation while in the Varlian palace. Later, one of his alien allies dubs him Skywalker. Some of the other slave leaders create a serum for use against the Varlians. The serum was meant to prevent the alien overlords from entering the cocoon stage. This works, but the larvae continue to grow instead of dying, becoming what we, the reader, recognize as Hutts. Cosmo was able to lead the slaves from the planet, using the Force and the crystal to part the Sea of Stars in the cluster. As the Gamorreans in their own ships pursue, in true biblical Exodus fashion, the stars return to their original positions, destroying the pigs. Cosmo dies from the strain in the process. His mate, with whom he has a child named Freedom earlier in the story, says he will be remembered as Cosmo Hinder, the Skywalker, as the surviving slaves head for the planet Corellia. If that story wasn't out there enough for you, and obviously in need of a good edit in order to even be considered as part of Star Wars continuity, even at the time, then let's look at the human exodus part of the story, which would have apparently been told in smaller chapters throughout the story after Cosmo found the book. Strap in, because this is going to be a wild ride. It turns out that the human slaves on the Varlian planet were captured on Corellia by the Rhodian servants of the Varlians. The humans had landed there after coming through a wormhole. From where did this wormhole lead? The Milky Way galaxy. The human ship, while en route to Alpha Centauri, had been thrown through time and space to the Star Wars galaxy. It gets funnier. The human ship had escaped an oppressive Earth that was the Earth of THX 1138. Names were done away with. Numbers were assigned, sex was forbidden, and society was controlled by computers. The name of the pilot of the escaping ship? Antonia Corelli. Her lover and one of the pilots of the auxiliary ships, named the Century Eagle? Paxton Solo. It doesn't stop there. One of the leaders of the Resistance is named Dale Hinder, the obvious ancestor of Cosmo. Dale is the descendant of a character from another George Lucas work, American Graffiti, Curtis Henderson. Let's read from Sawyer's outline. Dale has traced his own genealogy through computer records, going back 500 years. He knows all about his ancestor Curtis Henderson, for instance, Henderson being the form of the family name before the practice of using non-sexist, non-patronymic naming was introduced in the 21st century. But the new random serial number system will destroy the ability to trace family ties, and take away much of their identity. Thankfully, there is no mention of Bob Falfa being the ancestor of Paxton Solo. There may even be a reference to the two-headed dragon from Willow. What the fuck? It should be noted that the outline and sample chapters, according to Sawyer's website, were written in January 1995. This was well after Lucasfilm had decided on Shadows of the Empire project. To further make it clear that Sawyer's raw vision was not compatible, Ambush at Corellia, the novel by Roger McBride Allen, would be released the following month. It revealed that in the ancient past, an enormous device now called Centerpoint Station would be used to place multiple habitable planets in the Corellian system. Even previously released material didn't exactly line up with Sawyer's outline. It was clear the story proposed by Sawyer did not fit with the material being released or the Star Wars universe in general, even if it wasn't too outlandish, which it was. Many of the aspects of his outline would have been highly impactful to the continuity. Lucasfilm changed the project to a non-Star Wars project, and Sawyer dropped out. Author Deborah Chester would write the Alien Chronicles trilogy, which began publishing 3 years later in 1998. She wound up not using any of the designs in Monsters and Aliens from George Lucas. Interestingly, some aspects of Sawyer's proposed story are mirrored in the Rakata from the Knights of the Old Republic video game: enslavement of other species, use of the Force, killed off by a plague. As mentioned earlier, given that many, if not most, of the features of Sawyer's story didn't fit the existing Star Wars universe, there was a 0% chance it would have been published in anything close to its original form. Still, the publisher asked for it, and Sawyer gave it his best shot. One can appreciate the detail he put into the story using reference books and Laura's guides, even if some adjustments needed to be made. That's almost more than could be expected for current publications under the Star Wars name.